They held her military funeral. They told the Navy SEAL to let her go. But for 3 weeks, his instincts refused to believe she was dead. His German Shepherd K9 felt it too. While the world mourned, the dog found what everyone else missed, a weak, impossible signal. It wasn't a heartbeat. It was a cry for help, coming from a place that shouldn't exist. Now, one SEAL and his dog are about to enter the darkness to find the people the world already buried. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story moves you, please subscribe for more on Angels in Uniform. The rain began just minutes before the ceremony started. A light, steady drizzle that seemed to fall straight down, as if even the sky had chosen restraint. The military cemetery was quiet in the way only places of honor and loss could be. Rows of white headstones standing in silent formation, flags barely stirring in the damp air. A color guard moved with perfect precision, boots striking wet stone in measured rhythm. Everything was correct. Everything was proper. Everything was wrong. He stood a few steps apart from the others, hands clasped loosely in front of him, shoulders squared by habit rather than emotion. 32 years old, tall, lean, built with the dense, functional muscle of a man who had spent his adult life preparing for worst-case scenarios. His dark olive jacket hung heavy with rain, the fabric darkened where water soaked in. Beneath it, a simple charcoal gray shirt clung to his frame. His hair was cut short in a military fade, brown with faint lighter streaks near the temples. Always kept regulation, even when no one was watching. A faint scar traced the edge of his left eyebrow, nearly invisible unless the light caught it just right. His face was calm, angular, controlled. Too controlled. People around him mistook that stillness for strength. They always did. He did not cry. He did not bow his head when the chaplain spoke. He did not look away when the coffin was carried forward, draped in the American flag, edges sharp, corners precise. His blue-gray eyes stayed fixed on it, unblinking, as if staring hard enough might force the truth to surface through wood and cloth. Beside him sat his dog. The German Shepherd was 5 years old, black and tan with a dense, weatherproof coat already slick with rain. His build was athletic and compact, muscles coiled under fur, the kind of dog bred for endurance rather than display. A black tactical harness wrapped his torso, worn but meticulously maintained. His amber-brown eyes followed movement constantly, ears twitching at sounds most humans missed. He was trained, disciplined, and normally unshakable in crowds. Today, he would not lie down. The dog shifted restlessly at the man's side, nails clicking softly against the stone as he stood, sat, stood again. His posture was alert, but not aggressive. Body angled toward the coffin with an intensity that set him apart from the solemn stillness around them. Once he leaned forward, nose lifting slightly as if tasting the air. A low, almost inaudible sound vibrated in his chest. Not a growl, not a whine. Something in between. The man felt it before he acknowledged it. A tightening just below the ribs. A familiar pressure, the kind that came right before things went wrong. She would have hated this. A quiet voice murmured nearby. He did not turn. He knew the speaker. A fellow operator, early 40s, broader in the shoulders, hair cut close and already graying. A man who had survived enough missions to understand when not to fill silence. The voice carried sympathy, but also acceptance. The kind that made people uncomfortable to be around after funerals were over. She always said if she went, the man continued gently, she wanted it quick. No speeches. The Navy SEAL's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She said a lot of things, he replied. His voice was low, steady, and empty of warmth. She didn't say she'd go like this. The other man nodded, unsure what else to offer. He stepped back, giving space. Everyone gave space. Grief made people cautious. The chaplain's voice faded into the background as the ceremony reached its closing moments. The flag was folded with ceremonial care, each crease deliberate. When it was handed to the waiting officer, the German shepherd froze. His ears snapped forward. His body stiffened as if bracing against an invisible pull. The man felt the leash tighten in his hand. "Easy," he murmured automatically, fingers brushing the dog's neck, feeling the heat and tension beneath fur. The dog did not respond. His gaze was locked on the coffin now resting above the grave. His nostrils flared once, twice. Then, quietly, impossibly, the dog let out a short, broken sound. A restrained, questioning whine that cut through the stillness like a crack in glass. Heads turned. A few people frowned. Dogs weren't supposed to react like that at funerals. Trained dogs, especially. The man's pulse spiked. He crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to the dog's line of sight. "What is it?" he whispered, not for anyone else to hear. "What do you smell?" The dog did not look at him. His focus never left the coffin. The ceremony ended. People dispersed slowly, voices low, footsteps careful. Condolences were offered. Hands were shaken. The man accepted them with polite nods, his expression unchanged. But he did not move away from the grave. Neither did the dog. It was then that his watch vibrated once against his wrist. He frowned, glancing down. The device was old by military standards, scratched and dulled from years of wear, but reliable. The vibration was subtle, almost dismissible. He accessed the interface without thinking, more habit than intention. The screen flickered. No signal bars, no clear reading. Just a faint, unstable indicator blinking in and out. Weak, erratic, as if struggling to exist at all. His breath caught. That frequency was burned into his memory. He had seen it 100 times in controlled environments, training scenarios, and after-action reports. A personal locator beacon frequency, heavily encrypted, designed to transmit only under very specific conditions. Conditions that assumed the wearer was alive. "This can't be right," he muttered. The dog turned his head sharply toward him the moment the signal appeared. Ears fully erect now, body angling closer. His tail stilled completely. The signal dropped. The screen went dark. The man stared at it. Rain dripping from his lashes, heart pounding in his chest with a rhythm that felt unfamiliar and dangerous. He closed his hand slowly around the device, as if pressure alone could hold the moment in place. Someone behind him cleared their throat. "Everything okay?" He straightened, locking his expression back into place. "Yeah," he said. "Just reception." The lie came easily. Too easily. As the cemetery emptied, the rain eased. The man remained until the last uniform disappeared beyond the gate. Only then did he kneel beside the grave, resting one hand on the wet stone at its edge. The dog sat pressed against his thigh, solid and warm. "She's not here," the man said quietly. Not accusing, not pleading. Simply stating a fact he could not yet prove. The dog's ears twitched. The watch vibrated again. This time, the signal held. For 3 full seconds. Long enough for data to attempt a handshake. Long enough for a partial transmission to flash across the screen before collapsing. Coordinates, not one set. Several, layered, overlapping, chaotic. The man's blood ran cold. "That's not..." He swallowed. "That's not a single beacon." The dog let out another sound, lower this time, vibrating through his chest as he rose to his feet. He took 2 deliberate steps, then stopped, refusing to move farther away from the grave. The signal pulsed once more, faint but insistent. And with it, a name surfaced in the man's mind, not spoken aloud, but whispered in memory, passed between intelligence briefings and unofficial warnings. La Cárcel Negra, the Black Prison, a place officially denied, unmarked, unrecoverable. The man closed his eyes, feeling denial give way to something far more dangerous. Hope. Not the gentle kind. The kind that got people killed. If she was dead, the signal wouldn't exist. If she was alive, then this coffin was a lie. He rose slowly, rainwater dripping from his sleeves, and clipped the leash shorter. The dog finally moved with him, casting one last look at the grave before falling into step at his side. "If you're sending this," the man murmured under his breath, gaze fixed ahead. "Hold on." Behind them, the grave stood silent. Ahead of them, something was calling, and whatever it was not alone. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform. We believe that even in moments of grief, God sometimes leaves signs, not to explain the pain, but to invite us to seek the truth behind it. Claire woke to darkness that felt heavy enough to press against her eyes. It was not the soft darkness of sleep or the familiar quiet of night. This was a deliberate dark, engineered and complete, as if the world had been turned off without asking her permission. For a long moment, she did not move, not out of fear but out of calculation. Moving meant pain. Pain meant noise. Noise meant attention. She lay still and listened to her own breathing, shallow and uneven, tasting copper and old blood with every swallow. Her mouth was so dry her tongue felt like sandpaper. She did not know how long she had been unconscious. Minutes, hours, days. Time did not announce itself here. When she finally opened her eyes, nothing changed. No light crept in, no outline formed. The air was cold and stale, carrying the faint chemical sting of bleach layered over rust and something older, fear that had soaked into concrete and never left. Claire took inventory the way she had been trained to do when everything else was chaos. Wrists bound in heavy metal cuffs, arms raised just enough to set her shoulders on fire, ankles locked, feet barely brushing the floor. Torso bruised, ribs aching, but lungs still working. Head pounding, but clear. She was alive. The realization did not comfort her. It complicated everything. As her vision adjusted, shapes began to separate from the dark. A wall, a low ceiling, iron bars several feet away. Beyond them, faint movement, other bodies, other breathing. She was not alone. A soft sound drifted toward her, someone crying quietly, trying not to be heard. Another voice whispered something in a language Claire did not recognize. A third simply rocked back and forth, the rhythm of despair made physical. She shifted her gaze, careful not to draw attention, and counted silhouettes. Young, thin, wrapped in borrowed clothing that hung wrong on their frames. No insignia, no names, no proof they existed anywhere outside this room. Claire Donovan had been beautiful long before she ever wore a uniform. Even now, grime streaking her pale skin, golden hair tangled and matted against her cheek, there was a quiet symmetry to her face that had once made strangers look twice. Here, that beauty meant nothing. Her curves, her figure, the things people noticed in safe places were liabilities now. She focused instead on what could not be taken so easily: her mind, her training, her refusal to disappear quietly. Footsteps echoed down the corridor, unhurried and confident. Keys clinked. The sound carried authority. The crying stopped instantly. Bodies stiffened. Claire felt it too, the way fear moved like a current through the room, snapping everyone into stillness. The door opened with a metallic scrape, and harsh fluorescent light flooded in, stabbing at her eyes. She clenched her jaw and forced herself not to look away. Two men stood there. One was tall and broad, head shaved smooth, arms thick with muscle and crude tattoos that crept up his neck, moved like someone accustomed to obedience, someone who used his body as punctuation. The other was smaller, wiry, with a thin mustache and eyes that did not blink often enough. His clothes were clean, his posture relaxed, his mouth curved into a polite smile that never touched his eyes. Claire recognized the type instantly. The first existed to apply force, the second existed to enjoy it. They did not ask her name. They already knew it. They did not comment on her appearance. That came later, after resistance had been measured and catalogued. The smaller man spoke calmly, explaining the rules as if he were outlining office procedure. Where she was, what they wanted, what would happen if she did not cooperate. Claire listened, memorizing cadence and tone, the way his fingers tapped the clipboard he carried, as if time itself belonged to him. She gave him nothing. No defiance for show. No tears. Just steady eye contact that thinned his smile. The first blow came without warning. Pain detonated across her ribs, knocking the air from her lungs and folding her forward against the restraints. She counted instead of screaming. 1, 2, 3. Pain was information. Information could be used. When they were finished, they left her shaking and gasping, the light snapping off as abruptly as it had come on. Darkness returned heavier than before. Somewhere down the hall, laughter echoed. Claire rested her forehead against the cold metal cuff, sweat cooling on her skin. Fear crept closer now. Not loud, not hysterical, but quiet and persistent. "No one is coming," a voice whispered inside her. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. She did not argue with it. She acknowledged it. If no one was coming, survival had to mean something else. Hours passed in fragments, screams in the distance, spaced deliberately, as if scheduled. A girl near the bars whispered her name once, then never again. Another begged for water until her voice cracked and failed. Claire rationed her own breath, offering what little comfort she could with murmured words and eye contact. She became stillness when chaos threatened, a fixed point the others unconsciously oriented around. Leadership, she knew, did not require rank. It required presence. Night, or what passed for it here, brought cold deeper into the bones. Claire drifted in and out, jolted awake when hands grabbed her arms and dragged her from the cell. The corridor lights blurred. The interrogator's voice returned, softer now, almost kind. He injected something into her IV line. Heat flooded her veins, making the world tilt. She fought to keep her focus, clinging to details. The way the light flickered, the pattern of cracks in the ceiling, the sound of her own heartbeat. When they finally threw her back into the cell, she barely registered the impact. She lay where she fell, vision swimming. That was when she heard it. A thin, ragged sound from the corner near the bars. A girl no older than 17 lay curled on the floor, breath shallow and uneven. Her eyes were open, unfocused. Claire crawled toward her as far as the restraints allowed, whispering, urging her to stay awake. The girl's lips moved. A prayer, maybe, or a name. Claire could not tell. She did not know if the words were meant for God or for someone who might still be searching. The girl died before the lights came back on. Claire stared at the empty space where warmth had been moments before. Something inside her fractured quietly, without drama. She had promised herself she would keep them alive. She had failed on the first night. Guilt settled over her heavier than fear, pressing down until breathing hurt. Living, she realized, was not the same as being saved. Sometimes it was just prolonged witnessing. As the guards dragged the girl's body away, Claire's gaze lifted involuntarily toward the ceiling. For a split second, through the fog of pain and exhaustion, she thought she heard barking. Not loud, not real, but remembered. A deep, steady sound from far away. It made no sense. Yet, in that impossible instant, her heart steadied. The sensation vanished as quickly as it came, leaving behind a question she could not shake. If she could hear him, even in her mind, did that mean she had not been erased yet? When the cell door closed again, Claire shifted carefully, ignoring the flare of pain. Her breathing slowed. Resolve hardened into something cold and unyielding. She could not rely on rescue. She could rely on preparation. Her thoughts turned inward, to the small, dull ache along her upper arm where her medical ID chip sat beneath the skin. Standard issue, passive. Meant to be scanned if she was found bleeding out on a battlefield. Not meant to save anyone here. An idea formed, not hopeful, not comforting, but clear. She tested the edge of her cuff against her skin, measuring distance and pressure. This would not be quick. It would not be clean. But it would be deliberate. Claire closed her eyes and made a decision that felt heavier than any oath she had taken. She would not fight to live for herself. She would fight to leave proof, evidence, a trace that could not be explained away as rumor or grief. If she was never rescued, then the truth would still have a chance to escape, even if she did not. Blood welled where metal bit into flesh. She welcomed the pain, focused on it, used it. Survival, she understood now, was not always about staying alive. Sometimes it was about refusing to vanish quietly. From that night on, Claire no longer measured time in hours. She measured it in resolve. And with each breath she forced into her aching lungs, she carried the weight of those she could not save, turning guilt into fuel. This place would not break her. It would not claim her story, not without a fight. If this chapter moved you, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform. We believe that even in the darkest places, God allows signs of hope to survive. And sometimes miracles begin with the courage to leave a trace. Pain arrived before consciousness fully did. Claire drifted back into herself in fragments. First the ache in her shoulders, then the fire along her ribs. Then the dull, grinding throb in her arm that made her jaw clench before she even understood why. Darkness still ruled the cell. No light. No sound beyond the distant drip of water somewhere in the concrete belly of the prison. The air was colder than before. Or perhaps her body had simply lost more heat. She breathed carefully, counting each inhale, each exhale, grounding herself in the only rhythm she could still control. The girl's absence was the first thing she noticed. The space near the bars where a young body had lain was empty now, scraped clean as if she had never existed at all. No blood, no blanket, no proof. That emptiness pressed on Claire harder than any blow. She swallowed against the tightness in her throat and forced herself not to look away. Remembering was a form of resistance. Forgetting was what this place demanded. She shifted her wrist slightly, testing the restraint again. The metal cuff was unforgiving, its edge biting into skin already raw from hours of pressure and movement. The pain sharpened, immediate and honest. Claire welcomed it. Pain meant she was still present, still capable of choosing. She thought of the small ache beneath her skin, high on her upper arm, the medical ID chip, A passive device no bigger than a grain of rice, implanted years ago with little ceremony. Blood type, allergies, identification, designed to help medics save her life on a battlefield where seconds mattered. Designed for a world where help came. Not here. Claire closed her eyes and let the decision settle fully, completely. There would be no half measures, no hesitation. If she was going to leave a trace, it had to be deliberate enough to matter, slow enough to be intentional. She angled her wrist, pressing the sharp edge of the cuff into her upper arm, right where she knew the chip rested beneath muscle and skin. The first contact burned. She sucked in a breath through her teeth and pressed harder. Pain bloomed white-hot, radiating outward, stealing her breath in sharp bursts. She counted anyway. 1, 2, 3. Blood welled almost immediately, warm and slick against her skin. Her vision blurred, but she forced her eyes to stay open, to witness what she was doing. This was not punishment. This was purpose. Each movement was careful, controlled, guided by memory and touch rather than sight. The darkness made everything slower, more intimate. There was no rushing something like this. Her arm trembled violently as she worked, sweat breaking out along her spine despite the cold. She felt the faint, sickening resistance of flesh giving way. Then the hard, unmistakable shape beneath. Relief and nausea hit her at the same time. Tears sprang to her eyes, not from fear, but from the sheer reality of it. She was cutting into herself in a prison where screams were currency, and still this felt like the most honest thing she had done since waking up here. When her fingers finally brushed the chip, she nearly laughed. A quiet, broken sound that stayed trapped in her chest. The device slid free with a slick, almost delicate ease, far smaller than the cost of removing it. She closed her hand around it instinctively, fist tightening until her knuckles ached. Blood dripped steadily now, pattering softly against the concrete floor. She pressed her forearm against her thigh, trying to slow it, breathing hard, dizziness creeping in at the edges of her vision. She could not keep it on her. They would search her again. They always did. She needed a place no human would think to look. Somewhere beyond routine cruelty. Somewhere that relied on instinct rather than procedure. Her gaze lifted toward the far corner of the cell, where the wall met the floor in a shallow, shadowed recess. The concrete there was cracked and uneven, darkened by years of moisture. She had noticed it before. Not because it mattered then, but because she had been trained to notice everything. She dragged herself closer, movements clumsy but determined, leaving a faint smear of blood in her wake. The smell of iron filled her nose. Claire used her fingertips to pry loose a small chunk of crumbling concrete, revealing damp earth beneath. The space was barely large enough for the chip. Perfect. She hesitated only once, pressing the cold, smooth device briefly against her lips, an unconscious gesture that surprised her with its intimacy. Then she tucked it into the hollow and packed the dirt back over it as best she could, smearing the surface until it looked untouched, unimportant. If anyone found it, it would not be by sight. It would be by something older. Her strength gave out then. Claire slumped back against the wall, breathing ragged, blood still seeping through her fingers. Her head lolled forward, chin dropping to her chest. The room spun slowly, the edges of the world softening. She was very tired. So tired it felt like sleep might claim her whether she wanted it to or not. In that hazy, slipping moment, she heard it again. Not loud, not real. The sound of paws on earth. A low, familiar huff. A presence she had trusted with her life more than once. Her lips curved faintly, just for a second. "Find it," she whispered to no one. Or perhaps to him. She did not know if the sound lived in memory or faith, but it steadied her just enough to keep her eyes open. Somewhere far away, under a different sky, a man stared at a report that did not make sense. The document lay flat on the table in front of him, edges perfectly aligned, pages crisp. Casualties confirmed. Mission compromised. No survivors. Official language, clean and final. He read it again anyway. Blue-gray eyes scanning the lines as if repetition might force the truth to surface. 32 years old. Face carved by discipline and restraint. He sat with shoulders squared and jaw tight, the faint scar near, his left eyebrow pale against his skin. His olive jacket was folded neatly over the back of the chair. His hands were still. He did not believe it. The German shepherd lay at his feet, black and tan coat gleaming under the fluorescent lights of the operations room. 5 years old, alert even at rest. His ears twitched every time someone passed the doorway. When the man shifted in his chair, the dog lifted his head immediately, amber eyes locking onto him with quiet intensity. This dog had tracked insurgents through rain and dust, had ignored gunfire and chaos with the same calm focus. He trusted data. He trusted training. Tonight, he trusted neither. The man closed the report and slid it aside, fingers lingering on the paper longer than necessary. Something was wrong. Not in a way he could articulate yet, not in a way that would satisfy a commanding officer. Just wrong. The timing, the lack of detail, the absence of secondary verification he knew should have existed. His gut tightened, a sensation he had learned not to ignore, no matter how inconvenient it made things. "Hey," a voice said quietly from across the room. His commanding officer stood near the map board, a man in his late 40s with graying hair and eyes that had seen too many versions of this moment. He watched the younger man carefully, reading the tension in his posture. "You good?" The Navy SEAL nodded automatically. "Yeah, just double-checking." The older man studied him for a beat longer, then turned back to his work. Trust here was a fragile currency. The younger man waited until he was sure no one was watching before slipping the report into his bag. Not destroying it, not altering it, just holding on to it. A small act of defiance, invisible on the surface, heavy with consequence. At his feet, the dog rose and padded closer, resting his head against the man's knee. The contact was grounding, real. The man exhaled slowly and let his hand drop, fingers threading into thick fur. "Something doesn't add up," he murmured, more to the dog than to himself. "And I think you know it too." The dog's ears flicked forward, tail giving one slow, deliberate wag. Back in the cell, Claire drifted in and out, pain and exhaustion tangling together. She pressed her bleeding arm against her body, focusing on staying conscious long enough for the wound to clot. She had done what she came to do. The trace was left. Whether it became salvation or condemnation was no longer in her control. As the hours crept by, guards passed without noticing the darkened patch of concrete, without suspecting the story buried beneath their feet. Claire closed her eyes, finally allowing herself to rest, knowing that if the chip was found, it would change everything. For better or worse, if he found it, if he listened, if the truth survived long enough to matter. If this chapter moved you, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform. We believe that even when truth is buried, God has a way of guiding the faithful to what must be found. He did not ask for permission the way men normally did. There was no formal request, no official briefing slide, no stamped document moving from desk to desk. He waited until the operations floor thinned out, until the noise softened and the day shifted into that quiet window where decisions were made not by policy, but by people. The commanding officer stood near the glass wall overlooking the hangar, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, studying a tablet with the distant focus of someone who already sensed what was coming. The Navy SEAL stopped a few feet away, posture straight, hands relaxed at his sides. At 32, he carried himself with a restraint earned through years of learning when not to speak. His face was sharp, controlled, blue-gray eyes steady beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. The faint scar near his left eyebrow caught the light as he tilted his head slightly, waiting. "I need 12 hours," he said finally. The commander looked up slowly. He was a man in his late 40s, broad-shouldered but worn down by decades of responsibility, hair threaded heavily with gray. His eyes were sharp, assessing, used to reading between words. "For what?" "For a verification run," the SEAL replied. He did not say rescue. He did not say her name. "Off the books." Silence stretched. Somewhere below, a helicopter engine whined to life, the vibration faint but persistent through the glass. The commander studied him carefully, weighing risk against instinct, regulation against experience. He knew this man, knew his discipline, knew he did not chase ghosts lightly. 12 hours, the commander repeated at last. "No paperwork, no record. If you don't find anything, this conversation never happened." "And if I do?" the SEAL asked quietly. The older man's jaw tightened. "Then you better be ready to carry the weight of it alone." The SEAL nodded once. That was all he needed. The team came together in pieces, quietly, without ceremony. 4 men total, chosen not for rank, but for trust. Each carried the look of someone who understood what it meant to step outside the safety net. No names were written down, no call signs logged. Gear was prepped with deliberate care, stripped of anything unnecessary. If this went wrong, there would be no one to blame but themselves. At the edge of the hangar, the German shepherd waited. 5 years old, black and tan, compact and powerful. He sat with disciplined stillness while his handler checked the straps of his black tactical harness. His amber eyes tracked every movement, ears flicking toward distant sounds. He was not restless. He was focused. This was the posture of a dog who knew work was coming and welcomed it. "You ready?" the SEAL murmured, fingers brushing the dog's neck. The dog's tail gave a single, slow wag. They lifted off under fading light, the landscape below dissolving into shadow as the aircraft cut south. The coordinates pulled from the unstable signal led them far beyond mapped routes, into terrain the satellite feed rendered vague and unreliable. Mountains folded into one another like dark teeth. Valleys swallowed signal. The world here resisted being observed. They landed several kilometers out and moved on foot, the air thin and sharp in their lungs. The dog moved ahead, nose low, body flowing smoothly over uneven ground. The SEAL watched him closely, trusting instinct more than technology now. Every step deeper felt heavier, as if the land itself were pushing back. "This area's clean on satellite," one of the men muttered, scanning the ridgeline. "No structures, no heat signatures." The SEAL frowned. "Then why does it feel like we're being watched?" No one answered. The dog slowed abruptly, head lifting, ears snapping forward. He stopped at a patch of ground that looked no different from the rest. Rocks, scrub, shadows. He circled once, then twice, nostrils flaring. "There," the SEAL said quietly. "That's it." They advanced carefully, senses stretched tight. The ground changed underfoot, more compacted, disturbed by repeated movement. A hidden access path revealed itself only when you knew how to look for it. The satellite had missed it entirely. They should have paused, regrouped, adjusted the plan. The SEAL didn't. Driven by urgency he could not fully articulate. By the image of blood on concrete and a signal buried beneath stone, he altered their route, cutting closer than planned. The decision saved time. It also cost them. The first shot cracked through the air without warning. Stone exploded inches from his shoulder. The team scattered instinctively, returning fire, chaos erupting where there should have been silence. The dog lunged forward, teeth bared, reacting faster than any of them. A second shot rang out. The SEAL felt the leash go slack in his hand. He turned just in time to see the dog stumble, a sharp yelp tearing from his chest as he hit the ground hard. Blood darkened the fur along his flank, spreading fast against black and tan. The world narrowed violently. "Rex!" he shouted, dropping to his knees beside him without thinking. The firefight ended as quickly as it had begun, the enemy retreating back into terrain that swallowed them whole. The SEAL barely registered it. His hands were already pressed against the wound, fingers slick with warm blood. The dog panted hard, eyes wide but focused, trying to push himself upright despite the pain. "Stay with me," the SEAL whispered, voice tight, unsteady in a way his men had never heard. "Stay." The injury wasn't fatal. He knew that even as fear roared through him. A graze. Shallow. But it was real. And it was his fault. He stared at the blood on his hands, red against skin. And for the first time since this began, fear cut through him. Not fear of death, not fear of failure, but fear of losing the one being who had followed him into every dark place without question. Losing him because of a choice he had made. They patched the wound quickly, hands efficient, movement sharp. The dog whimpered once, then leaned heavily into his handler's chest, trusting completely. The SEAL closed his eyes for half a second, pressing his forehead to the dog's, breathing him in like an anchor. "I'm sorry," he murmured, not sure who he was saying it to. They pulled back, regrouping in silence. No one challenged the decision aloud. They didn't need to. The weight of it hung between them, thick and unspoken. Ahead, the terrain descended into a basin cloaked in shadow, the entrance to something deliberately hidden. The SEAL rose slowly, blood dried dark on his gloves, resolve settling into something colder and heavier. Whatever lay ahead had already taken something from him. He would not let it take more. As they moved again, deeper now, he understood what the place was doing. It wasn't just designed to kill. It was designed to force mistakes, to twist urgency into recklessness, to bend people until they broke themselves. Somewhere beneath their feet, truth waited. And it would not come easily. If this chapter moved you, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform. We believe that even when fear is born from our own choices, God can still guide us forward. And sometimes miracles begin with the courage to continue despite guilt. They moved deeper at a pace that felt wrong, as if the air itself resisted their presence. La Cárcel Negra did not announce itself with walls or watchtowers. It revealed itself in layers. Ground that bore too many footprints for a place that did not exist. Corridors carved where satellite imagery showed solid rock. Doors hidden behind concrete skins meant to deceive anyone who trusted maps more than instinct. The Navy SEAL felt the pressure building in his chest with every step, a steady compression that made breathing feel like effort rather than reflex. He adjusted his grip on the rifle, aware of the slight tremor in his hands, aware too of the blood already dried dark on his gloves. The German shepherd moved ahead with measured caution. 5 years old, compact and powerful even with the tight wrap along his flank. He favored the injured side only slightly, refusing to slow the team. His ears pivoted constantly, nose working the stale air, tail held low and steady. He was quieter than usual, not from pain, but from concentration, reading a language written in scent and vibration that humans could not see. Every few meters, he paused, checking corners that looked empty but felt wrong. The seal followed his lead without question. The corridor narrowed, walls closing in, concrete rough beneath their gloves. Sound carried strangely here, muffled in one direction, amplified in another. Then they heard it. A scream, cut short. Another followed, higher, edged with panic. Women's voices, young, terrified. The sound threaded through the stone like a wire pulled tight. The seal's jaw locked. His team slowed instinctively, weapons raised, eyes scanning. He signaled a halt, then another step forward. The screams came again, closer now, behind a wall that looked no different from the others. No markings, no handle. Just a seam, faint and vertical, almost invisible unless you were searching for lies. The dog stopped, not a pause, a refusal. He planted his feet in front of the seam, head lifted, nostrils flaring hard. His body angled sideways, blocking the approach, amber eyes fixed on the concrete as if it might move on its own. A low sound vibrated in his chest, not a growl, not a whine, a warning. The seal crouched, heart hammering. "You got something," he murmured. He did not reach for the door, not yet. This was the moment he had feared since the signal first flickered to life. Not the firefight, not the injury. This, the space between knowing and seeing, between hope and confirmation. If he opened that door, whatever waited on the other side would be real in a way he could not undo. He thought of the woman he had buried in his mind, of her laughter on a wind-scoured range, hair pulled back, eyes sharp with focus. Of her calm under pressure, the way she took responsibility without asking for recognition. He had loved that version of her quietly, carefully, as if naming it might break it. If the person behind this door was not that woman, anymore, if survival had stripped her down to something raw and unfamiliar, could he still reach her in time? The screams rose again, closer, overlapping now, panic spreading like fire through dry brush. The seal exhaled slowly and placed his hand on the seam. Cold, solid. The dog leaned into his leg, a grounding weight, then stepped aside just enough to allow him through, eyes never leaving the door. He pushed. The wall shifted inward with a muted grind, revealing a room lit by harsh overhead bulbs. The smell hit first. Sweat, fear, disinfectant, and blood. Dozens of eyes turned toward them at once. Young women, teenagers. Some huddled against the far wall, others pressed together in the center, hands raised instinctively in surrender. Clothing hung loose on thin frames. Faces were drawn, hollowed by hunger and terror. They did not scream now. They stared. And there, standing between them and the door, was her. Claire Donovan did not look the way he remembered. Her hair, once neatly restrained, hung in tangled strands around her face, dulled by grime. Her pale skin was marked with bruises that told a story no report ever could. Her tactical clothing, faded, torn, borrowed and repurposed, fit differently now, worn less as uniform and more as armor. She stood straight despite exhaustion, shoulders squared, body angled protectively toward the girls behind her. One arm was wrapped tight against her side, stained dark where fabric met blood. The other was extended slightly, palm open, a silent command to stay back. Her eyes met his. They were steady. No plea, no relief, no collapse, just recognition and something harder beneath it. The SEAL froze, breath trapped in his chest. For a fraction of a second, time fractured. He saw the woman he had known and the woman before him at the same time, layered and impossible to separate. He wanted to close the distance, to pull her into his arms, to tell her she was safe now. The instinct roared through him, fierce and unthinking. She shook her head once, almost imperceptibly. Stay. The message landed with surgical precision. Behind him, one of the team shifted, startled by the sight of so many captives. The movement was enough to draw attention. A guard shouted from somewhere down the corridor. Footsteps thundered closer. The room tightened with panic. Several girls began to cry softly, eyes darting between Claire and the armed men at the door. Claire's gaze never left the SEAL. "They're not ready," she said quietly. Her voice was rough, worn thin by days of shouting and nights without rest. "If you rush this, they'll scatter. Some won't make it." He swallowed hard, nodding once. He understood. She had become something else here, not just a survivor, a shield. She stepped closer, lowering her voice further. "I didn't send the signal to be saved," she said, eyes unwavering. "I sent it so you'd come, so you'd stay." The words cut deeper than any accusation. In them, he heard trust and a burden he could not refuse. The guards were closer now. Shouts echoed, boots pounding concrete. The SEAL raised his hand, signaling his team into position, mind racing through contingencies. He caught Claire's wrist gently, just long enough to feel her pulse. Fast, strong, real. "We're getting them out," he said. "All of them." She searched his face, as if measuring whether he truly understood the cost. Then she nodded and stepped aside, placing herself between the captives and the approaching danger once more. The dog moved to her other side, posture alert, ready, eyes sharp with purpose despite the pain in his flank. Gunfire erupted in the corridor. The rescue was no longer a question. It was a countdown. As the SEAL took position, heart pounding, he understood the fear he had named, but never faced until now. He did not fear finding death. He feared finding life too late. Life that demanded more time, more sacrifice, more courage than he had prepared for. And he would give it anyway. If this chapter moved you, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform. We believe that even when love is tested by fear and delay, God can turn our hesitation into purpose and open doors we were never meant to face alone. The door was open, but the moment was nothing like the one he had imagined during long nights of denial and anger. There was no rush forward, no desperate embrace, no collapse into familiar arms. The space between them remained charged and deliberate, heavy with everything that had happened while the world believed she was dead. Claire stood where she had been, shoulders squared, chin lifted. Her posture was calm but not relaxed, as if she were holding herself together by will alone. Up close, the damage was clearer. Bruises mottled her pale skin in shades of purple and yellow. Her lips were cracked, her eyes shadowed by exhaustion that no sleep could erase. Her blonde hair, once kept with disciplined care, was pulled back crudely, strands escaping to frame a face that had hardened without losing its quiet beauty. She looked thinner, sharper, changed. The Navy SEAL stopped a few feet away, rifle lowered but not slung, awareness split between her and the chaos building outside the room. At 32, he had learned how to read battlefields and men alike, but this was neither. His blue-gray eyes searched her face, looking not for reassurance, but for truth. "You're here," he said finally. It was not a question. "So are you," she replied. Her voice was steady, stripped of softness, but not of warmth. "That's enough." Behind her, The girls huddled closer together as gunfire echoed down the corridor. Some were barely more than children, thin arms wrapped around themselves, eyes wide and hollow. One clutched another's sleeve as if letting go might cause her to disappear. Claire shifted subtly, placing herself between them and the open door, an instinct so ingrained now it required no thought. The dog moved to her side, positioning himself with practiced precision despite the stiffness in his injured flank. 5 years old, black and tan coat darkened with sweat and dust, amber eyes alert and intelligent. He stood like a living barrier. He glanced up at Claire once, then back to the corridor, tail low, ready. The SEAL took a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "We need to move," he said. "Now." She shook her head, just once. "Not yet." His jaw tightened. "Claire, if you'd come tomorrow," she interrupted quietly, eyes never leaving his, "I would have accepted that too." The words landed softly, but carried weight enough to stop him cold. "I stopped waiting a long time ago." The admission was not accusation. It was fact. It told him everything he needed to know about who she had become here. She had not survived by clinging to hope. She had survived by letting go of it. A shout rang out closer this time. Boots thundered. The firefight was shifting toward them faster than anticipated. One of the team appeared at the doorway, breath sharp, eyes scanning. "We've got movement converging," he said. "Multiple hostiles." Before the SEAL could respond, a single shot cracked through the air from the far end of the corridor. The sound was sharp and final, different from the others. He felt the moment stretch, instinct screaming. The dog reacted first. He lunged forward, a blur of muscle and fur, throwing his body sideways just as the round tore through the space where Claire had been standing. The impact knocked him hard against the concrete. A sharp yelp ripped from his chest, followed by a wet, choking sound. Blood bloomed bright and immediate against his dark coat. "No!" The SEAL was moving before the word left his mouth, dropping to his knees beside the dog, hands already pressing against the wound. It was worse than before. Deeper. The dog's breathing came fast and shallow, eyes wide but still focused on him, trusting, unafraid. Claire froze for half a second, then knelt on the other side, hands steady despite the tremor running through her. She tore a strip from her sleeve without hesitation and pressed it into his flank, applying pressure with practiced efficiency. "He saved me," she said, not as a realization, but as a statement of fact. "He did," the SEAL replied hoarsely. His voice broke despite his effort to control it. He looked down at the blood coating his hands, the same color he had seen on concrete days ago. The echo of guilt was immediate and brutal. This was the second time, another consequence of his choices. The dog's tail thumped weakly once against the floor. "I need you to listen," Claire said urgently, leaning closer so only he could hear. Her eyes burned with intensity, not fear. "There are more cells, lower level. At least 24 women. Some are injured, some won't last long." His head snapped up. "We don't have time. We don't have time not to," she cut in. "They'll erase everything once you leave. The records, the bodies, me." She swallowed, forcing the words out. "I didn't stay alive for you to save me. I stayed alive to make sure this ends." Sirens wailed now, harsh and rising, the sound of the place turning on itself. The team leader barked orders from down the corridor, urgency sharpening every syllable. "Exfil window is closing." The SEAL looked between Claire and the dog, then toward the terrified faces behind her. The choice he had feared crystallized with terrible clarity. If he pulled back now, he could get her out. get the dog medical care, preserve what he had come for. If he stayed, everything became uncertain. Time, lives, his career, his own survival. He met Claire's gaze and saw the question she did not ask. Not will you save me, but will you stand with me? In that moment, he understood that love did not always ask to be protected. Sometimes it asked to be trusted. He exhaled slowly, decision settling like stone. Mark the locations, he said. All of them. Relief flickered across her face. Not joy, not gratitude. Relief that he understood. She leaned close and spoke quickly, mapping the hidden levels from memory, describing patterns, guard rotations, doors that did not exist on any blueprint. She had been watching, learning, preparing, not for rescue, but for reckoning. They moved again, slower now, burdened by the wounded dog and the weight of what lay ahead. Claire walked beside him, hand hovering near the dog's neck, steadying both of them with her presence. She did not cry. She did not apologize. Neither did he. As they descended toward the lower levels, gunfire and shouting above them, the SEAL realized something with quiet clarity. The rescue they had planned was over. What came next was something else entirely. A dismantling. A confrontation that would not end with extraction. Claire glanced at him once as they passed through another shadowed corridor. "This doesn't end when we leave," she said softly. "I know," he replied. The dog lifted his head slightly, eyes still bright despite the pain, and pressed closer to them both. Somewhere beyond the concrete and steel, the world still believed in simple endings, in survival as victory. Here, in the depths of La Cárcel Negra, they learned the truth. The rescue was ending. The war was just beginning. If this chapter moved you, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform. We believe that even when salvation looks different than we imagined, God can turn courage into purpose, and pain into a calling greater than survival. The alarm did not scream. It howled, a metallic, merciless sound that ripped through the corridors of La Cárcel Negra, bouncing off concrete and steel, turning the fortress into a living thing aware of its own wound. Red lights strobed along the ceiling, bathing faces in harsh pulses that made every movement feel frantic and unreal. The moment Claire finished marking the final cell location, the system reacted. Doors slammed. Shouts echoed in Spanish. Boots pounded from multiple directions. "There's no stealth left," the team leader barked over comms. "We move now, or we don't move at all." The Navy SEAL tightened his grip on the rifle, shoulders squared as the weight of command settled fully onto him. At 32, he had led men through fire before, but never with so much riding on what they chose to leave behind. He glanced at Claire. She nodded once, already ushering the freed women forward, placing herself at the rear despite her injuries. Her pale face was set with resolve, blonde hair plastered to her temples with sweat. She did not look like someone waiting to be saved. She looked like someone making sure others were. The dog limped beside them, breathing labored but determined. His black and tan coat was streaked with drying blood, yet his amber eyes missed nothing. 5 years old, trained through years of service, he had shifted into pure working instinct, pain secondary to purpose. He moved ahead, nose low, then high, testing air currents where chaos confused human senses. Gunfire erupted at the far intersection. The team returned fire, sharp, controlled bursts meant to buy seconds, not victory. Screams followed. Guards, not prisoners. The difference mattered. It always had. They turned down a corridor that was not on any map. Concrete narrowed, ceilings lower, air stale and wet. The seal felt the creeping edge of doubt. This was not the planned route. This was not any route. The dog stopped abruptly, ears pricked, tail rigid. "What is it?" the seal murmured, dropping to one knee despite the danger. The dog whined softly and pawed at the wall, then moved toward a rusted service hatch, half hidden behind loose wiring and debris. The smell of earth seeped through, a promise of outside air. An exit. The last one. Before they could reach it, the roar of an engine thundered from above. A vehicle-mounted weapon spun up somewhere beyond the outer wall. The sound was unmistakable to trained ears. "RPG!" someone shouted. The explosion was blinding. Heat and force slammed into the corridor, throwing bodies against concrete. The seal barely had time to turn when he felt a solid impact knock him sideways. He hit the ground hard, vision ringing, lungs burning. Then he heard it. A sharp, broken cry that cut through the chaos with surgical precision. The dog lay several feet away, body twisted unnaturally, back legs unmoving. Shrapnel had torn through muscle and bone meant for the man behind him. Smoke curled from the impact. Point. The dog's chest rose and fell in shallow, frantic pulls, eyes locked on the seal with unwavering focus. "No," the seal breathed, scrambling to him, hands already shaking despite years of discipline. He pressed down hard, trying to stop the bleeding, voice cracking as he called the dog's name again and again, as if repetition could will reality into changing. Claire dropped beside them, ignoring shouted orders, ignoring incoming fire. Her hands moved with grim precision, stripping fabric, applying pressure, whispering words that were half instructions, half prayer. Her face did not break, but tears carved silent paths through grime on her cheeks. The dog's tail twitched once. That was when the seal understood. The dog had not been protecting the mission. He had been protecting him. "Move," the team leader yelled. "Chopper inbound, 30 seconds." The seal scooped the dog into his arms, despite the pain screaming through his own body. The weight was wrong. Too heavy. Too limp. He staggered forward, Claire at his side, one arm supporting him, the other holding a weapon she barely remembered picking up. They burst into the open under a sky ripped apart by rotor wash and gunfire. The extraction point was chaos. Dust, smoke, tracer rounds stitching the darkness. The helicopter hovered low, door open, crew shouting. Another explosion rocked the ground behind them, close enough to throw debris over their backs. The seal stumbled, nearly fell. Claire shoved him forward with strength that surprised them both. "Go," she shouted. "Don't you dare stop." They piled into the aircraft. The door slammed shut. The helicopter lurched upward, metal screaming as rounds pinged against its skin. Only when the fortress shrank beneath them did the seal allow himself to collapse to the floor, cradling the dog as medics rushed in. Blood soaked everything. "He's alive," one of them said quickly. "Barely. We've got a pulse." The seal pressed his forehead to the dog's, breath hitching. "You saved me," he whispered. He didn't know if the dog could hear him. He needed to say it anyway. As the helicopter cut through the night, Claire reached into the torn lining of her vest and pulled out a small, sealed data module. She placed it in the seal's trembling hand and closed his fingers around it. "This is everything," she said softly. "Names, routes, buyers, proof." Her eyes were steady, resolute even now. It doesn't end here. Weeks later, the world would learn what Cárcel Negra had been. Raids followed, arrests, headlines that spoke of bravery and justice in careful, sanitized language. Networks dismantled, survivors returned home. The dog survived. But he never walked the same again. The SEAL sat with him on the porch of a quiet house far from any base, hand resting on fur that had once bristled at the sound of gunfire. The dog's eyes were calmer now, older, retired. Claire came to visit sometimes, no longer in uniform. She worked with rescue organizations, pulling women and children out of the shadows the world preferred not to see. She hugged the dog first every time, pressing her forehead to his, whispering thanks she never spoke out loud to anyone else. The SEAL stayed. He learned how to be still, how to care instead of command. They had all survived. And yet, something had been left behind on that battlefield. Some people do not die in war, but we lose them because they survived. If this story touched you, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform. We believe that God works through loyalty, sacrifice, and quiet courage. And sometimes, the greatest miracles are the ones that change who we become after the battle ends. Sometimes miracles do not arrive as thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes they arrive as loyalty that refuses to let go, as courage that keeps moving when hope is gone, as a silent choice to protect someone else at the cost of yourself. This story is not about war alone. It is about faith that survives in places where darkness believes it is won. It is about the kind of love God places in ordinary hearts. Love that stands guard, that bleeds, that stays. In our daily lives, we may never face a battlefield, but we all face moments where we are tired, afraid, or tempted to give up on people we care about. And in those moments, perhaps the miracle is not being rescued, but becoming the one who refuses to walk away. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that they are not forgotten. Leave a comment telling us who you are still holding on to, even when it is hard. Subscribe to Angels in Uniform to walk with us through more stories of sacrifice, faith, and quiet courage. May God bless you and your family. May He give you strength when you feel weak, courage when you feel afraid, and love that endures when the world feels broken.